Okay, this video is a book report. The name of the book is From Dawn to Decadence by Jacques Barzun. Jacques Barzun, he died in 2012. He lived to be 104 years of age. He was born in France, moved to the United States. He was a professor of history at the University of Columbia. And he was a real bright guy. And it's a very good book. I'd probably rate the book about 7 or 8 stars out of 10. What's good about it? He knows a lot. Okay, he's a smart guy, and he's been teaching history for like over 50 years. So he really has a good sense of the history of the Western world, and it goes from the year 1500 to the year 2000. That's what he meant by 500 years of Western history, from dawn to decadence. And he hits on a lot of the high points. I like that. Columbia is a little bit of a liberal place, so they frown on Christianity. And the book would have been better if he had more emphasis on Christianity. It's kind of like Christianity is the whole foundation of Western civilization. You're kidding yourself if you think you're going to talk about Christianity without Western civilization without talking about Christianity. It's the reason why Western civilization exists. It's the reason why there's such a thing. And it's the best civilization that ever existed on the planet by far. Okay, the audiobook was 31 CDs long, so it keeps you busy in the car for a while. A lot of good one-liners. The person who read the book on the audiobook did a good job. I've actually gone through it about 2-3 times, but this is the first time I've done a book report on it, and I just listened to it again in the car recently. Let's see, and I think also it's harder to get the book published, harder to sell the book if you promote Christianity in it, so to speak. Nowadays that's sort of been pushed out of the public sphere, even though it's still the most common religion in the world by far. It's like 2.3 billion Christians on this planet, but they don't really help each other, so they're much weaker than those numbers would suggest. He does some things that are a little stupid, which made me lose respect for him. Like he praises modern art, okay? Partly because he's a little French, so they start praising Impressionism, which I think is a bit of a deterioration of art, and then that leads them into praising things like Picasso. And Picasso's a scumbag, communist piece of crap, high school level talent artist. He also praises some of the famous scumbag philosophes, the atheist philosophers of the 1700s. I always kind of lose respect for a book when they put too much praise into the encyclopedia of Diderot and Rousseau and Voltaire and all those other scumbags. Look, those guys destroyed France. They destroyed the entire country. It's so obvious by now to anybody with a brain in their head, atheism destroys a country because you can't hold the population with it, and then it leads to a complete reason, so to speak, which dehumanizes people, and then it leads to terrible cruelty. That's always what happens. That's what happened in France. That's what happened in Vietnam. That's what happened in Soviet Russia. Okay, it's what always happens. Okay, let's see what else. All right, so he does have some good insights. So here's some quotes by Jacques Barzun. Reading is the most important subject in school. All other intellectual powers depend on it. A good education must go beyond mere practicalities and seek the ideal goal. For Protestantism, Luther is like Marx and Calvin is like Lenin. In order to be well educated, a person must read a lot on their own. That's true. You don't learn all this stuff in school. You do it because you have a desire to become educated, and you read on your own. And all it takes is a little bit of reading every day. The history of creation is but a succession of battles between genius amateurs, inspired heretics, and orthodox professionals. The theory is that the artist lives in an idealized world and then studies and then comes back and delivers useful information, culture to the masses. It is a noteworthy feature of the 20th century that for the first time in over 1,000 years, its educated classes not expected to be at least bilingual. It used to be, anybody that's educated in Europe would have to at least, speak Latin so they could all communicate, and then also probably to know French. French was the cultural language. Athens was the Paris of Europe. Formal education makes people biologically stupid. Yeah, the more women get educated, the less likely they are to ever have a child. I know lots of female doctors that are pretty too, not even married, in their 40s, no kids. Okay, Barzun says, ancient Greece is the cradle of civilization. Anybody who's ever studied history knows, out of all the ancient civilizations, the ancient Greeks are up here. Everything else in ancient civilizations down low. It stinks compared to the ancient Greeks. There's nothing even in the ballpark of the ancient Greeks. Almost all of our vocabulary about thinking, it all comes from the Greeks. Epicureans, hedons, empiricists, all this metacognition stuff, skepticism, cynicism. The Bible is a whole literature book, 39 books. The Bible gives people a shared culture. The Protestant religion, they put the Bible into vernacular. They were earlier to do that. And I would give them credit, even though I think Protestantism tends to stink because they don't appreciate art enough and the saints or the Virgin Mary, the traditional family. They're not as much fun. I still give them credit. They're pretty literate. The Scottish people, once they insisted on having schooling for everybody so they could learn the Bible. Learning to read the Bible motivated the Germans to become literate. Learning to read the Bible motivated the British to become literate. And once they read the Bible, then they can do everything. You see, that's how it starts. Okay, he says the books translated by the monks, like the Book of Kells, for example, they made the Bible into a work of art. Okay, the humanists called the writings of the ancient Greeks and Romans the good letters. Okay. The words that describe our way of thinking, they come from the Greeks. Regular letters are Roman font. Italics come from Petrarch's slanted style of writing. Italics sounds like Italians. The Catholic worshiping of the saints is a form of polytheism. And he's not the first to notice that. Anybody who studied Christian recognizes that Catholicism with the worship of the saints, the worship of Mary, is a little bit more like polytheism. It coexisted with paganism for 500 years. So it's much more tolerant of a variety of views. That's why it's called the Universal Church. That's also why it's the most fun. It emphasizes have fun while you're here on earth, whereas most of the Protestant sects are just do what we say or you'll burn in hell. And it's like, give me a break, pal. What do you know? Okay, Cicero is seen as a great articulate hero trying to save freedom in Rome. Cicero was the hero of the humanists until about 1890. By around 1890, they were starting to phase Latin and Greek out of the schools, and students no longer were as familiar with the great ancient Greeks and Romans like Cicero. Okay. Knowledge of Greek was less common. Up until 1900, the educated class of Europe was expected to at least know Latin. Come on. Or French too. Luther had been called the Protestant Pope. In general, the Old Testament God is pretty harsh. He punishes people. The New Testament God is pretty nice. He forgives people. It takes the presence of about 100 goods to make a great. So if you want to become great, go to a place where there's a lot of good. So for whatever your field, if you're in sculpture and art or whatever, for one really great superstar in literature and painting and sculpture, there's going to be 100 goods. So get into that area. Cimabue made a painting, the first one that was not Byzantine, with more realistic, naturalistic style, and the Italian people loved it. They gave him a parade for that. There's a painting of that. Okay, it takes 100 gifted artists to make a great artist, or to make half a dozen great artists. The Renaissance popes left a legacy in paint and stone. Yeah, people say, oh, the indulgences, they wasted the money. No, Pope Julius made the greatest paintings, frescoes, and sculpture ever in the history of the world through his contracts of Michelangelo, Raphael, and the other ones. Oh, how much beauty lies buried in the past. Yeah, it takes time to learn all these things. Opera, art, sculpture, architecture, music, Like if I got another life and I learned multiple languages, I would like to translate all the operas into a bunch of different vernaculars so more people could enjoy them. The USA has got their colonies free because they were united. They wanted no excess tax without representation. And what I've seen is the reason why Christians are so weak in the world today, and the Hispanics and all these other groups, is because they don't help each other. They don't stick together. I've seen all these different cultures. The Irish think they're Irish and they don't help each other much. They help each other a little bit. The Polish, they're jealous of each other. They don't help each other much. Most people are divided about all kinds of stupid things. So when you hear the term diversity, what's really happening is the billionaire perverts are laughing at the public saying, you stupid jerks. You don't help each other. You're a bunch of chumps. Okay, Jacques Barzun, the main teaching of Christianity occurs in the home by the family, especially the mother from her children. That's another reason why they want to send kids to preschools, to get them away from their mothers, their parents, so that they don't want them to learn Christianity. Christianity makes a person more resilient, makes them more intelligent. Without it, they don't have a perspective for life on earth. They don't learn it in the public schools. The most unifying thing in any age is the predicaments, the things it cannot escape, that it must deal with. Okay, he says of a lot of people, they only speak from the dictionary of accepted ideas. Neo-Thomism, New Aquinas. I'm like a version of Neo-Thomism, recognizing that faith and reason go together. Italy is the mother of high culture. The Jesuits made an extensive school system that produced many famous students, including Voltaire, who subsequently tried to destroy the Catholic Church. So even though the Jesuits were famous for making people really smart and well-educated, sadly, many of their students turned against them and tried to destroy the place, and they kicked the Jesuits out of France. Okay, and he's talking about some writer. It reminds me certainly of James Joyce and his Ulysses. This isn't prose, this is anti-prose. The welfare state can't help becoming the judicial state. Dostoevsky was a young Ivan who became a mature Alyosha, and that's what I strive to be like. That's the big message of Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Try to be like Alyosha. That's a good way for a man to live. Smerdyakov and Dmitri were the mass man. Okay. Ralph Waldo Emerson and the Transcendentalists didn't talk much about the past, in part because the USA didn't have much of a past at that time. Jacques Barzun says, Darwinism was the new Reformation. Darwinism is the most overrated thing. All it's good for is helping to explain microevolution, why there's different types of dogs and cats and horses. Okay, but then nobody cares about that. What matters is macroevolution, origin of life and origin of complexity in living creatures. And it stinks. It can't explain that at all. Darwinism, as it is taught in the high school, colleges, and grad schools, is fake. Okay, I've made other videos about that. And I majored in Stanford in Darwinian biology. I was an A+ student in the subject. I've kept up on it for many decades. Okay, World War I, Europe's near suicide. Millions of men were lost, talented men on both sides. Political correctness does not legislate tolerance. It only organizes hatred. In teaching, you cannot see the fruit of a day's work. It's invisible, and it remains so for about 20 years. Okay, John Lennon praised atheism, but he lived on a private 72-acre estate, so he could hide away from the chaos that atheism creates. Okay, so that's all I got. I hope you found that helpful.